So about 10 years ago, Stephanie Lorenzo began her journey from which was born Project Futures. The main catalyst was a book about a Cambodian woman who was sold into the sex trade. She also happened to read this book while on holiday with her family in Cambodia. And that is all I will tell you, because Stephanie will tell you the rest. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a real honour to be here today amongst such distinguished women. Today I want to acknowledge and give voice to the millions of women and girls who are bought and sold each and every day to service $1 billion trade in human beings. From the sex trade in Cambodia, where girls as young as 10 are used for their innocent bodies, to the sweatshops in China, where factory workers churn out the clothes we wear in harsh conditions for as little as $4 a day. In the digital age, with a wealth of information at our fingertips, you and I can no longer sit by and say we didn't know. My story was motivated by these uncomfortable truths. It's a story about perseverance, living by the motto that actions truly speak louder than words, and refusing to let the status quo dictate the life that we lead. It's about standing up for what you believe in, but also knowing when it might be time to let go. So I'm going to start by admitting something. Never in a million years did I ever think as a young person growing up that I would ever work in the charity sector. Charity for me as a young person lacked that sort of prerequisite cool factor and didn't appeal to me the way popular culture did. My exposure to charity was through my church, my family, or my school, and I never felt compelled to partake in it independently from that. In hindsight, I can see how selfish, shallow, and fickle this attitude was, but unfortunately, that was certainly my cold, hard truth. But the story of my life would change when at 21 years old, I picked up a book about a woman sold into the sex trade as a child in Cambodia. Here is the story of a girl sold, raped, beaten and deemed worthless simply because she was a woman. I was captivated by this book, not just because of the tragic story that unfolded, but more about what this woman managed to do in spite of that tragedy, with no formal education, no resources, and no money. She took her experience and turned it into something positive, and for over 20 years had established and run safe houses in Cambodia for rescued women and children who had suffered her same fate. I put this book down and I took a long, hard look at myself, and to be quite frank, I felt ashamed. I was one of the lucky ones, born into an amazing Catholic family. I had a good education, a roof over my head, food on the table every night, but what had I used any of these good graces for? My biggest issue as a 21-year-old was what to wear out on a Saturday night in Sydney. So I decided right then and there I was going to use my voice, my skills, and my networks to do one thing to help this woman's work. And that one thing was a charity bike ride across Cambodia the following year to raise money and awareness for victims of sex trafficking. Now, I knew I couldn't organise this bike ride all on my own, so I asked my closest friends to help me. I called in the favours, and together we created a basic website and we promoted it to every single person we knew. I was astonished a year later to have 21 people join my trip, and we had collectively raised $80,000. I was exhilarated. Thank you. I was exhilarated that my one decision to do something after reading that book could have this kind of outcome. It was beyond any of my expectation. Now, I must confess something else. I really did think that this one bike ride was going to be my one good deed as a 21-year-old. I had no intention of doing anything else until at least I turned 30. But you and I all know that the Lord truly works in mysterious ways. That bike ride in 2009 just so happened to coincide with International Women's Day, and our group was able to visit one of the safe houses that we had raised money for. Seeing that work firsthand on the ground and meeting the most incredible, resilient, beautiful women and girls whose lives were so very different from my own sparked something in me, and I knew it was never going to be just one good deed. I came home to Australia determined to shine a light on the atrocities that I had just witnessed and give my generation some sort of outlet where they could use their time, skills and talents like I just had. But how do you engage a selfie-obsessed millennial generation? And how do you get them to care about the issues that they couldn't see or understand given our first world status? There was very little recognition in the Australian media at the time about human trafficking, and stories that were told seemed almost surreal to someone that was so far removed from this sort of tragedy. So we all know young people around the world, they love one thing. They love a good party, don't they? So I decided if there was going to be one way to speak to my generation, I was going to do it in a forum that they knew and could understand. Went out on a Saturday night partying with friends. So enter our first, what we called a party for purpose. So with that same group of friends, we organised a party. We got a venue donated, we got a DJ, we even managed to wrangle a few free drinks for everyone that came. Halfway through the night, and we charged an entry fee, of course, like every other nightclub, but our difference was 100% of that entry fee went to the cause. Halfway through the night, we'd pause to talk about sex trafficking and what I had experienced firsthand in Cambodia. 300 people in that nightclub were stunned into silence when I told a story of a young girl, Lithia, a quiet but confident 16-year-old girl who had been trafficked from Vietnam to Cambodia and sold into the sex trade at just 10 years old. Now, we didn't want to guilt people into caring. We wanted them to realise that their time there tonight had meaning beyond having a great time. We wanted them to realise that philanthropy was no longer going to be a label for those with deep pockets. We wanted to remove the guilt and we added purpose. And that's how Project Futures was born. Party after party, bike ride after bike ride. We wanted social networking to equal social responsibility and use our creativity for a greater purpose. It was young people, I believed, had the power to be influential amongst their peers. They wanted to stand for something and create real and lasting change. Project Futures was simply an outlet for them to do just that. So in 8 years of running this wonderful organisation, our young professional networks have raised over $4.5 million and supported 5 anti-human trafficking projects in the Asia-Pacific region. We partner with those projects on a long-term and sustainable basis, tracking their impact and allowing donors to be connected to this issue in new and meaningful ways. The hard work really didn't seem so hard when we heard of stories like Nora, a girl that I had met at that bike ride in 2009, who only last year graduated from a Bachelor of Psychology. She's now working back in the safe house that she was supported by. Thank you. Or the countless number of women who manage to start up their own small businesses or get jobs to support themselves and their families on their own, independently and financially. Or Sraypik, a young woman who got a local segment at a radio station in Cambodia to share her experience about what she had experienced as a resident of the safe house, as well as stories of her peers. These were the kind of outcomes that our generation bound together for. We were just a bunch of kids. We really wanted to use our position of privilege to help those less fortunate than ourselves. So my toughest challenge actually came after I was asked to speak here with you today. It was actually my decision to resign as the CEO of Project Futures. So to decide that it was time to let go of the very thing that you built from nothing, that you shed your blood, sweat and tears to create, was extremely difficult. Running a voluntary organisation to running $1 million a year charity operation was vastly different. We needed structure, a fresh perspective and the right expertise. I learnt that at these certain crossroads, you need to let go of your pride and ego, and you have to realise that just because you created it, you are not always going to be the right one to lead it forward or have the right answer for it all the time. It was a very hard pill to swallow. So I took some time to reflect, to listen to my gut, to pray, and I realised that it was time. This work was truly tough and challenging, and I needed a break. See, I believe everything in life has a cycle. These cycles allow you to explore, discover, and get curious about new things again, not stay stuck. I was scared of certain things, losing supporters. I was scared of losing control. I was even scared that maybe my personal legacy might somehow be forgotten. It's actually weirdly fortuitous to be standing here right at the Vatican at this certain crossroad in my own life. See, I was raised by amazing Catholic parents. We would go to church every single week without fail growing up, and we'd sit right up the front row. My dad would actually belt out each hymn at the top of his lungs. And as a young person, again, I think he just needs to make sure God knows we're there. They were very active in the church. My dad served as an acolyte, and my mum volunteered anytime she could. As a child, I always felt that any good graces that God would bestow upon my family for all my parents' hard work would certainly extend to me. So I never actually took the time to really understand my faith, what it meant, how to live it out, until now. Seeing my parents live out their faith each and every day taught me that what speaks volumes about a person is in them living out their faith and values in the work that they do, in the relationships that they have. It's something that I think all people need to realise, that seeing your parents have that kind of relationship with God and certainly have that sort of action in your life is truly amazing. This world cannot ever heal from the atrocities like human trafficking, war, poverty and climate change without you and I taking real and continuous action every single day in our local and global world. Now, my generation gets a lot of flack in today's society. And I'll admit, to some degree, it's very well deserved. Our innate narcissism is often viewed by other generations as an indifference to the plight of others. But my experience in growing a movement led and carried by the millennial generation proves otherwise. That innate narcissism sits hand in hand with an insatiable desire to connect with each other, to connect with the world. And that's what we need now, more than ever before. I think in the digital world that is so digitally linked that geographical boundaries remain almost irrelevant. We need to stoke that desire and tap into the unrealised potential of our younger generations. So please, everyone here today, remember, please always encourage and nurture young people that strive to change the world and fight for justice, because every voice matters. Your voice matters. Your thoughts, your decisions, and your ideas matter. But most importantly, your actions matter, because those actions truly have the power to change someone else's world. Thank you very much.